Well, welcome to another edition of E.W. Jackson for America. Great to be with you again today. I want to talk a little bit about, to come back to something I've talked about before today, but I want to look at some specific stories that deal with this issue. I've said we are in the middle of a cultural revolution, and that is the absolute truth, folks. This is a Gramsci-type cultural and social revolution. Antonio Gramsci, the infamous communist theorist, talked about the fact that you could take over a country without a violent revolution by simply getting in and undermining the values that hold that society together and supplanting those values with a new set of communist or Marxist values. And that is exactly what's happening in our country right now. I mean, just think about the basics that uphold. I don't want to get to very high level spiritual concepts, but just think about some of the basics that allow our society to operate as a free nation. For example, the work ethic. The notion that every American's responsible for yourself. You work hard for what you want. You do everything you can to make a good life for yourself and for your family. And that responsibility is yours and yours alone. And that the society rewards hard work. The economy rewards hard work. Was it Rousseau's? I may have that wrong, but I think it was Rousseau who said, build a better mousetrap, and men will beat a path to your door. The notion that you invent, you innovate, you do things to try to help your neighbors, to support your neighbors, and that not only enriches them, but it enriches you as you freely enter into transactions over things that your neighbor has that you want, and so forth. I mean, so basically the work ethic, the entrepreneurial spirit grows out of the work ethic. You work, you build, you create, you do things, you make your life. We're now in a situation where many are being told that our system is so fundamentally unfair. In fact, we've been told, have you heard this one specifically, to say any American who works hard can succeed or make a life for yourself, or however you want to say that, is racist. You can't say that anymore. That's not allowed. That's just kind of one of the fundamental building blocks. So if that is replaced with you are entitled, you are a victim, you need reparations. If you're black or you're Hispanic or you're a woman or you're a homosexual or you're gender confused or whatever, you are a victim, you are entitled, you are owed. You've been discriminated against. You don't have to work hard. There's DEI to make sure that you get the equity that you deserve. You have to strive to be better than your competing worker or business. No. You're entitled because you are a victim. Suckers work hard. Everybody knows that gets you nowhere. You see what I mean? That's just one of those basic building blocks. I mean, here's another one that used to be a byword in our country and used to be understood by all. It is no longer. I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. That's gone. That's gone. If I don't like what you say, the mantra now is, I'm going to deplatform you, I'm going to censor you, and of course, sadly, for some who take it to the extreme, I want to kill you. Certainly not going to let you be heard, because I don't like what you have to say. Just those two things. Just fundamental things. I mean, here again, they're not on a high spiritual plane, just sort of fundamental things that help us to function as a free society. Both of those have been severely undermined. We are in a cultural revolution. Okay? The concept of equality before the law. Now, I know it's never been practiced perfectly. I know there was a period of segregation, and a period when, particularly in certain southern states, where if you were black, probably some would argue in all southern states, if you were black, you weren't going to get a fair trial. And that's been true, by the way, for people throughout our history and throughout the history of the world. If you had no money, if you had no connections, if you had no influence, the likelihood is that you would not get a fair shake. So, I mean, I understand that it's never been practiced perfectly, but the concept has always been we are a nation of laws and not of men. And the concept that we have always espoused, and espousing is not meaningless. That's something, because it tells us what the standard is, even if we don't quite meet it. And the standard is equality before the law. That every person has a right to be judged by a jury of their peers, and that due process of law must be engaged before you can have your property, your freedom, or your life forfeited. And that's true for every single American. That was the standard. That's no longer the standard. The standard now is if you are a victim, if you are in a certain class of people, we can't apply the same strictures to you because it's not fair. This is a cultural revolution that we are witnessing. And part of our task, part of my task, part of your task as a Christian, part of what our organization staying true to America's national destiny, is dedicated to, my church, saving souls, saving families, saving the nation, is dedicated to, is reversing that cultural revolution and bringing us back to the foundational principles that made America the greatest nation on earth. There is a scripture, the exact place is eluding me at the moment, so I want to make sure I get to it. It's in two places, in Proverbs 8:28 and Proverbs 23:10. Do not remove the ancient landmark which your fathers have set. Do not remove the ancient landmark which your fathers have set. Now, for me, those principles that I just enunciated, just two of many, are ancient landmarks which our fathers set, and they are being removed. Those are foundations. Psalm 11:3, if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? We've got to restore. We've got to revive. We've got to resurrect. We've got to strengthen those foundations. We've got to put those foundations back in their proper place. And the Cultural Revolution is attempting to destroy those foundations and remove those ancient landmarks. Now, I want to also remind you that I've said, for me, now we know overall, if America rejects God, we're doomed. If America becomes a culture that rejects God, we're doomed. It's just that plain and simple. We're doomed. Because the Bible says in Psalm 9:17, the wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. I think that's more figurative than literal, because nations don't go to hell. People do, but you get the point. The nation will be turned into an hellacious nation, a nation of chaos and anarchy and disorder and lawlessness and murder and mayhem and rape and robbery. And so that's the overriding principle. But as people get further and further and further from God, those landmarks, if you will, those foundations get eroded, and the nation slips further and further and further into a hellacious or chaotic or anarchic situation. So there are two institutions that I've said are critical to preserve, and to preserve inviolate, to preserve functioning the way they're supposed to be functioning. or we cannot maintain ourselves as a constitutional republic. And those two institutions are these. Number one, our voting system. If the American people become convinced, as sadly many are today, I don't think a majority, and I don't think most think it's hopeless yet, but when Americans become convinced that voting is an irrelevance because the system is inherently corrupt, because your vote really does not matter, because there are powers at work that are going to bring about the outcome they want no matter what the vote says. They're going to make the vote say what they want it to say no matter what the vote actually is. In other words, just like communist countries tout elections. Give me a break. Communist China doesn't have elections. The Soviet Union doesn't have, well, it's now no longer the Soviet Union, but Putin's Russia doesn't have elections. Those things are fixed in advance. I'm convinced that's what the Democrat Party wants for America. They want the outcome predetermined, and the outcome is they are in power forever. That's their outcome. They are in power forever, and they get to rule over hell. And I really believe because they have rejected God and rejected all transcendent morality. Let me say that again, because that's worth noting. I believe that the Democrat Party en masse has rejected God and rejected transcendent morality. In other words, rejected the idea that there are morals to which we are all, moral principles to which we are all accountable, whether we agree with them or not, whether we follow them or not, we are still accountable. Okay? People like to point the finger at Christians and try to point out our faults and our foibles. And I remind people, look, I'd be lying to you if I said, oh yeah, everything that God has said I've always obeyed, even since I've been a Christian. I'd be lying to you if I said that. It's not true. And you want to know the details? Well, I'm not giving them to you. But the standards don't change because E.W. Jackson doesn't meet them. I mean, God forbid, and believe me, I am not in any way practicing sin, okay? I'm not in any way practicing sin. It doesn't mean I don't fall short, but I'm not trying to practice sin. I don't wake up every morning trying to figure out how I can do something that God doesn't want me to do. I wake up every morning thinking, how can I live the way God wants me to live and do the things God wants me to do? But let's just say, for example, if I tell a lie, that doesn't change the commandment, you shall not bear false witness. That doesn't change what God says about lying. It just means that I've fallen short. Now, what do I have to do? Pick myself up, repent, and say, Lord, forgive me. I shouldn't have done that. Lord, let me straighten that out, and then commit to always, always, always telling the truth. But what we've got now are people who basically have said there are no standards. We will make up the standards as we go along, and we will do whatever we want to do. And that's it. That's the only standard there is. This is how communism and Marxism thinks. The only thing that's moral is what advances our cause. And the only thing that's immoral is what detracts from our cause. So if lying, stealing, cheating, killing, torturing, genocide, whatever, if it contributes to our cause, it's okay. If it hurts our cause, it's bad. And in that kind of topsy-turvy logic, let's just be clear, that's the new logic of many in our country, the Democrat Party in our country. And under that logic, Hitler would say, it is moral to kill the Jews. It is immoral not to kill the Jews because killing the Jews advances the cause of Germany. And of course, he was just as evil and as wrong as any human being could ever be, as any that's ever walked the face of the earth. But he was convinced and convinced others based upon his own moral standards that what he was doing was right. And that's what you get when you reject God's standards. You make up whatever you want to satisfy your own lusts. And these idiots on the left don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand they're committing suicide. But that's exactly what they're doing. But the bad thing is they want to drag us into that suicide hole with them. And we're not going. So that's number one, the voting system. So they say, oh, it's okay to do mail-in ballots, and it's okay, you don't need an ID, because they want to cheat. That's why they're doing it. I mean, come on, folks. Let's stop kidding ourselves. Why do you knock down standards that provide prohibitions and provide guidelines and parameters? Because you don't want any. That's why you knock them down, because you don't want any. And this idea that, oh, we can't have IDs because they're discriminatory against black people. You know, why don't you just say what you mean? A, we want to cheat, and IDs get in the way. And B, we don't mind arguing that black people are too stupid to have IDs and too stupid to know how to use them. And so we can use that as an excuse. You can't expect those poor dumb black people to know how to use an ID or to get one. I mean, after all, everybody knows they're inferior. Well, everybody knows they're victims of their own inherent lack of intellect and lack of ability and lack of initiative. I mean, you might have to go out and get an ID, and everybody knows that black people are too lazy to go out and get IDs. Yeah, I know it sounds ugly because it is ugly, and that's exactly the way the left thinks about black folks. They just won't say it, but that's exactly the way they think about black folks. And in their unguarded moments, it spills out. And here's number two. If the criminal justice system ever gets to a point, and folks, sadly, we are headed that way, where we have no confidence in it, where it no longer gives us the hope of fair and impartial justice, but rather becomes a tool of political persecution. You don't like what I stand for, you put me in jail. You don't like the views I hold, you put me in jail. If we ever come to a point where the American people believe that the criminal justice system is nothing but a political tool of the left to persecute people, you put those two things together and you got the formula for blood in the streets. I mean it, folks. I don't mean to overly dramatize this. I'm just telling you the truth. In my heart, this is where we are. If those two things go, well, what's left? Because and here's why I say those two things. Now, those two things would go because people reject God, reject his standards, and they start making up stuff of their own. Those two things go because power is the God that the left serves, and these are two critical systems for getting and keeping power. I mean, there's no more power you can have over a person than to arrest them and lock them up. And of course, if you've got the power to assure the election outcomes before they even happen, because you're cheating and you're defrauding and you're basically just manipulating the system rather than allowing the true will of the American people to be honestly expressed, you can assure power until you die. If those two things go, blood will run in the streets. Because look, here's the reality. When you start telling people, I'm going to arrest you because you preached out of Romans chapter 1, or I'm going to arrest you because you won't let your child be mutilated and have your daughter's breast cut off and have your son's genitalia cut off because we say that your child is a quote unquote transgender, we're going to arrest you and put you in prison. Where does that leave us? You know, I don't have any responsibility I want to show you that this, particularly with regard to the criminal justice system, that this is exactly what is happening. We've got an outlier, which is the Justice Department is going after Cori Bush, but I frankly think that the Justice Department is going after Cori Bush because they're afraid that Cori Bush is just so crazy that she's going to lose votes for Joe Biden and the Democrat Party, and they've decided to go after her. But were it not for that, I think she could do whatever she wants to do, be as lawless as she wants to be. And I think the same is true for Fani Willis. They don't want to go after these people, but you become a threat to their quest for power, even if you generally espouse views that they agree with, they don't care because you're in their way. You are in their way. And by the way, and in that way, the Republican and Democrat parties are no different. They eat their own when their own become a threat to the power system that they're trying to control. That's the same is true in both parties, by the way. That's why I say I'm a Republican still, but I don't have any uncritical and what's the word I'm looking for? But I don't have a naive view. Maybe that's the best word to use. A naive view about the Republican Party. But at least, as I've said before, the platform of the Republican Party, as it presently stands, is something that is in agreement with my fundamental principles of life and in agreement with the fundamental principles of our nation. The Democrat Party has gone wholly demonic. It is the party of Antichrist. So with those two outliers aside, and we'll see how those work out, but I guarantee you they're going to look for a way to whitewash those situations. Let me give you two other contrasts. Pro-lifers, folks, 6 of them, were found guilty on Tuesday for conspiracy against rights, violating the freedom of access to clinic entrances in regard to their protests in Tennessee at these baby killing facilities back in 2021. These people, for peaceful hymn singing, praying, they didn't block the entrance in any way, but they were there singing, praying, peacefully exercising their First Amendment liberties: freedom of assembly, freedom of worship, freedom of speech. They were accused of creating a blockade at the Carafim Health Center clinic, and it's not a health center clinic, it's a baby killing clinic. And for that, these folks are facing up to 11 years in prison. Chester Gallagher, 73 years old. Heather Idoni, 58. Calvin Zastro, 57. Coleman Boyd, 51. Dennis Green, 56. Paul Vaughn, 55. 73-year-old Chester Gallagher facing up to 11 years in prison. 4 others are scheduled to go to trial. Eva Edel, 87. Eva Zastro, 24, and James Zastro, 25. Paul Place, 24. They are scheduled to be tried. Now, the 6 who've already been found guilty are going to be sentenced in July. We'll see how the sentencing goes, but they could get up to 11 years in prison, folks. 11 years in prison. I want to contrast that, okay? I want to contrast that. Well, actually, let me throw one more in here. You remember this guy? Oh, I love this guy. Who cut the head off the Satanic Temple? It was a oh, come on here. He cut the head off of the statue of Baphomet, this demonic statue that they placed on the State House grounds in Iowa. He's from Mississippi, apparently. But he cut the head off the Baphomet statue that they placed up there, put there by the Satanic Temple, that claimed if you're going to have a Christmas display, then you got to have a satanic display. And sadly, the legal system went along with this craziness. First of all, in my view, Satanism is not a legitimate religion because it supports murder. It supports infanticide. It supports child sacrifice. It supports every filthy, vile. It supports pedophilia because it's a no-holds-barred hedonism. It's satanic. It's demonic. Forgive me for using the word satanic to describe what it is, but you get the point. Because what does satanic mean? Evil. Evil. We've got to use some common sense here. Religion, even when it's wrong, is supposed to have the purpose of elevating, inspiring, guiding people to do better, to do good. Why don't we create a murder's religion and say the point of this religion is to worship the God of murder and to encourage people to go out and commit murder every chance they get? So when somebody say, you got to let the murderer's display be on the state grounds because after all, they've got a right to their religion too. Well, of course, Muslims would say, well, that's crazy. But you know what? Somebody could do that. Because that's exactly what the Satanic Temple is doing. They're using the First Amendment and saying, well, we're religion too. No, you're not. No, you're not. But nevertheless, we ought to give a medal to Michael Cassidy. But instead, Michael Cassidy is facing fines and potential imprisonment. He's been charged with third-degree criminal mischief. By the way, it's a Class D felony. Felony, folks. And get this one. Are you ready for this one? It is a hate crime. It falls under the hate crime statutes of Iowa. That's why I hate crimes, because hate, to me, look, whether you kill somebody because you hate them because of the color of their skin, or you hate them because their so-called sexual orientation, whatever, they're just as dead. Punish them for the act, not their ideological or philosophical thinking behind it, but for the act. We do have gradations of punishment, whether it was premeditated or it was in the heat of passion or it was manslaughter, maybe something that happened during a fight. But that's not trying to get into the person's head and see, well, did he like the person he beat up, or was he again? Because really, that's right on the edge of punishing people. In fact, really, that's what you're doing. You're punishing people for their thinking. There's no freedom of speech without freedom of conscience. People have the right to think however they want to think, no matter how stupid it is. But that's another issue right now. I won't get off into that one. But they've thrown the book at this guy. He could come out of this a convicted felon for having cut the head off the devil. Now, look, I know, folks. I know it wasn't his property to destroy. I understand that. But here again, I'm trying to give you contrast, okay? So I want you to see these two cases, the way they're treating This guy, Michael Cassidy, the way they're treating these pro-life defendants. And did you see this? 3 illegal immigrants brutally attacked 2 police officers. I mean, beat them to a pulp. And there were 3 officers that approached them, by the way. At Midtown Manhattan, outside one of these so-called migrant shelters, they ought to call them illegal alien shelters, because that's what they are. I mean, these people with language, they're not migrants, they're illegal aliens. They ruthlessly beat these officers. They kicked them in the head. They kicked them in the back. And thank God these officers ultimately came out okay. They're not severely injured, but you could kill somebody that way. 3 illegal immigrants attacked these police officers and tried to kill them, in my view. You go look up the video yourself, and you'll see. You'll find it under Crime Stoppers and probably some other places as well. Folks, they were released within about an hour, as I see it reported, with no bail. Now, these are illegal immigrants, and they were released after having assaulted police officers. And I'm not talking about they pulled away or they pushed him or they jerked away from his hold. Or they kicked them, stomped them, punched them, beat them, and they didn't even get locked up. You see what I'm getting at? Here you got people committing, who aren't even American citizens, committing a vicious crime, And I think worse even than beating up a civilian, in the sense that when you attack a police officer, you're attacking the underlying legal apparatus that protects us all. So in that sense, it's even worse than just going after a civilian. Not that the police officer as a human being is more valuable than another human being, but you're really attacking the system when you go after a police officer, that the system that is supposed to protect all of us. And they walk. Talk about a slap on the wrist. They don't get a slap on the wrist. They get an ice cream cone. We're paying for their housing. We're paying for their food. We're paying for their phones. We're paying for their transportation. And they get to beat up our police officers and walk free. But here on the other hand, you've got an octogenarian. You got 70-year-old. You got a bunch of peaceful, hymn-singing, praying people standing up for the lives of unborn children, and they're threatening to put them in jail for 11 years. And you got a guy who says, the devil is evil, and I'm not going to stand for his statues being raised in my country. So he cuts the head off the statue. He doesn't hurt any human being. He did, as far as I'm concerned, he did a service for the people of Iowa and for all of us. And he is facing conviction for a Class D felony, which would mark him for the rest of his life and probably put him in jail. I'm sure there are people who want to badly. You see the point I'm getting at here. You see the contrast. See, that is where you look at a criminal justice system and you say something is terribly wrong. How can people doing things that symbolically at least are upholding our very best values, and they're threatened with imprisonment? And you have people who are attacking those fundamental values, and it's almost as if they're rewarded. In fact, almost as if they are being rewarded. That's a bad sign, folks. It's a bad sign, because you look at that and you say, well, do I as a Christian, do I as a conservative, do I as an American who loves this country and believes in it really have a chance? You think that $83 million judgment against Donald Trump was because whatever the woman claims happened, even here again, I don't believe her, but even if it actually happened, you think it was worth $83 million? Because people see the justice system, that wasn't a criminal trial, of course, but still they see the justice system as an opportunity to punish your enemies rather than an opportunity to simply seek justice without pride or prejudice. That's the way it ought to work. I said when I was running for president, I said that if I were president and I appointed Matt Staver to be my attorney general, I would say to him and to every assistant U.S. attorney and every assistant AG and every U.S. attorney and assistant U.S. attorney in America, you are never to use the criminal justice system to punish liberals or leftists or Democrats or anything like that. And if I find you doing that, you will be fired summarily. That's not what the criminal justice system is for. And we're not going to play their game, because you play their game and you are assisting them in destroying the integrity of our criminal justice system. No, we're going to do it with integrity. And we're going to follow the law, not follow our enemies and see what we can do to hurt them with the criminal justice system. But see, the left, but that's because I know God and believe in God. And I know God would not be pleased with me trying to use a justice system that's supposed to be fair and equal to punish people because I don't like them. God would never be pleased with that. And most right-thinking Americans wouldn't be either. All right-thinking Americans wouldn't be. But the left is not, they're not thinking anyway. That's where we are. Okay, well, Bishop Jackson, you laid out what a terrible situation that we're facing. If this is the kind of thing that spreads through our criminal justice system, then we can come to a point where it really is a dead letter. It really no longer functions the way it was supposed to. In fact, folks, we're looking for a situation, or we're looking potentially to see a situation in which, in the same way that a black defendant could rarely get justice in the antebellum South because of the extreme prejudice, we're coming to a point where a conservative, a Christian, cannot get justice because of the extreme prejudice. It's not based on race. It's based on ideology. It's based on ideas. It's based on perspective. We're not there yet because we've got a big country, thank God, and we've got conservative states where presumably everybody, left, right, middle, is going to get a fair shake because people believe in our country and want to uphold its most cherished principles. But that cancer is with us and it's growing. So what then do we do? Well, on the presidential level, we've got to make sure that the people around Donald Trump understand this and that he understands it and that he therefore is going to act with a severe integrity about making sure that people are never punished in his administration because he doesn't agree with them, or by his administration because he doesn't agree with them. That people are only punished because there is evidence that they have broken the law and they must be held accountable like every other American must be held accountable. That's it, and that's all. But look, on another level, on the local level, on the state level, you've got a bunch of prosecutors around the country that have been hired by George Soros. I say hired because that's the right word. He basically paid for their election so that he could have people in there who don't give a whit about the Constitution of the United States and don't care about the law and don't care about the safety and security of the American people because he is interested in undermining our system. And I'm not sure for what purpose, maybe to enshrine his family as the part of the board of dictators of America. I don't know what the man's real issue is, except he's demonic. I know that. George Soros is a demonic individual. And his son is following in his footsteps. That's what he does. He too is demonic. And as I've said before, Satan is not rational, because all he wants to do is steal, kill, and destroy, even if he brings what he destroys down on his own head. Because that's all he knows. He only knows destruction. He only knows the lie. He only knows chaos and disorder. We've got to make sure that the people serving us in these local offices, our congressional offices, understand what I just said to you and are willing to stand up and fight for these two fundamental institutions. And I know, folks, there are people, when I say the voting system, I didn't deal with that in any detail today. I just dealt with primarily our criminal justice system and giving you these examples. But when people say, well, our voting system is at risk, and they say, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're crazy, just calmly say, well, I love my country enough that I want our voting system to have integrity for the sake of all of us. And if you want to call that irrational, you want to call that conspiracy theory, conspiracy thinking, you call it what you want. But I know one thing: we can't go through elections where half the American people think that the elections are not valid. We can't have that, because that too is a formula for blood in the streets. Ultimately, we can't have it. We've got to have a voting process so that when the vote is counted, whether you're left, right, or center, whether you're Democrat, Republican, or independent, or something else, you can say, well, I didn't win that one, but I fought fair. The outcome is the outcome. We live to fight another day. Rather than, I won it and they stole it. And therefore, the offices that they hold under that fraudulent system and process that they've created, they don't really hold. They're not legitimate. And if they're not legitimate, why should anybody pay any attention to them? If they're not legitimate, is their authority legitimate? The answer to that question is no. And how long can the society live with that tension? How long can the society persist with that tension? It can't forever. Something's got to give. So we got to take a stand on the local level and the state level to make sure that our people, that our local prosecutors operate with integrity, or get rid of them and find somebody who will. Expose George Soros for all of his demonic power and influence and money. And pray. Pray for an awakening, folks, because we desperately need one. Oh, God, send an awakening. Send revival. Send a mighty move of your spirit to the United States of America, and help us to be in the forefront of that by unabashedly, uncompromisingly, unapologetically proclaiming the truth. You shall know the truth. The truth shall make you free. That's not only true for individuals, that's true for nations. So look, God bless each and every one of you. You stand up, step up, speak up, refuse to back up. Because we cannot be defeated if we will not quit. Because we are on God's side.